The cat who remembered every promise I was sleeping on the stair landing when the old man fell. Not fully sleeping. Cats rarely do that. We drift close to dreams, one ear still open to the world, one eye still guarding the small foolishness of humans. It was 5:12 in the morning in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and the Maddox house was holding its breath the way old houses do before something breaks. The pipes ticked behind the walls. Rain tapped against the kitchen windows. Somewhere in the basement, the furnace groaned like an animal too tired to wake. Then I heard his cane hit the floor. One hard wooden crack. Then his body. I lifted my head. The house went silent. Not peaceful silent, wrong silent. Arthur Maddox lay at the bottom of the stairs, with one hand still gripping the railing. His gray cardigan twisted beneath him. His face turned toward the front door, as if he had been trying to leave before the morning found him. He did not call out. Arthur rarely called for anyone. That was the first thing people misunderstood about him. They thought silence meant coldness. They thought a man who did not say, "I love you," did not love. They thought a man who answered pain with work, fear with rules, and grief with closed doors must have been made of stone. But stone does not wake before dawn to fix a leaking roof, so his daughter will not hear water dripping into a bedroom. Stone does not skip lunch for years, so the mortgage stays current. Stone does not keep a promise to a dead woman, long after everyone else has forgotten, she asked. I walked down the stairs slowly. My old legs are not what they were. 16 years is a long time for a cat, even one as stubborn as me. My name is Jasper. I belonged to Eleanor Maddox first. Then, after she died, I belonged to no one. That is what cats prefer people to think. But the truth is, I stayed for Arthur. Because someone had to remember what he never said. By the time Lisa found him, the rain had become louder. She was Arthur's oldest daughter, 52, a senior nurse at Penn Medicine Lancaster General Hospital, always moving like somebody late to save a life. She came down in her scrubs, hair tied too tightly, phone already in her hand. She saw him. Everything fell out of her face. "Dad?" No answer. "Dad?" Her voice cracked the house open. Within minutes, the house became chaos. Lights, footsteps, a 911 operator on speaker. Lisa kneeling beside him, checking his pulse with hands that had touched hundreds of dying strangers, but shook over her own father. Michael came out of the downstairs guest room, still half asleep, t-shirt wrinkled, face pale. 49, divorced, former construction project manager. A man who had spent most of his adult life trying not to need the house he kept coming back to. "What happened?" Lisa snapped. "Call David." Michael froze. "Now." Upstairs, Emily appeared at the hallway railing, 32, Arthur's granddaughter. No longer young enough to be protected from anything. She had returned home from Pittsburgh 3 months earlier, after her marriage collapsed quietly enough that everyone pretended it was a career reset. Behind her came Rachel, Michael's grown daughter, 28, who worked remote for a marketing firm and lived in the attic bedroom because rent in Philadelphia had become a cruelty disguised as economics. Many generations lived in that house, all adults, all tired, all carrying old bruises no one had properly named. And at the bottom of the stairs lay the man they all believed had never carried anything for them except judgment. The ambulance arrived at 5:34. Red light washed across the rain-slick windows. Arthur opened his eyes once while they lifted him onto the stretcher. His gaze moved past Lisa, past Michael, past Emily, past Rachel. To me, I sat near the umbrella stand. He looked at me the way he used to look at Eleanor when she was the only person in a room who understood him. Then his lips moved. No sound came out, but I knew the shape of the words. Keep them together. That was the promise. It had always been the promise. By sunrise, Arthur was in the hospital with a fractured hip, bruised ribs, and a small bleed the doctors wanted to monitor. The house returned to stillness, but not peace. Peace and quiet are not the same thing. Lisa came back first to gather his medication bottles. Michael stood in the kitchen staring at the coffee maker like it had personally failed him. Emily cleaned blood from the bottom stair with paper towels. Rachel sat at the table, crying without sound. Nobody looked at me. That was fine. Humans look at cats only when they want comfort without confession. I jumped onto Arthur's chair near the kitchen window. Nobody told me to get down. Eleanor used to sit there before the cancer took her. Arthur sat there after. The chair knew more truth than any of them. By noon, the house began doing what families do after fear enters a room. It began blaming. Lisa started with practical things. He should not have been on the stairs alone. Michael poured coffee. He's been on those stairs for 40 years. He's 81. He's stubborn. He's injured. He's always injured. He just never tells anyone. Lisa turned on him. And whose fault is that? Michael laughed once bitterly. Don't start. I'm not starting. I'm saying maybe if people actually lived here, instead of using this house as a storage unit when their lives fell apart. My life fell apart because I spent 20 years trying to impress a man who never once said he was proud of me. The kitchen went cold. Emily stopped wiping the stair. Rachel looked down. Lisa's face tightened. You think you're the only one he was hard on? Michael leaned against the counter. No, I think you became just like him. That one landed. Lisa said nothing. Rain slid down the windows in thin gray lines. The Maddox house sat on a tree-lined street in Lancaster's historic district. 3 stories of red brick, black shutters, warped floors, and a porch that sagged slightly on the left side. Arthur bought it in 1979 when the neighborhood was rougher and money was thinner. Eleanor loved this house immediately because of the stained glass window above the stair landing. This house has a heart, she told him. Arthur looked at the cracked plaster, the bad wiring, the leaning porch. This house has problems, she smiled. So do we. He bought it anyway. That was another thing they forgot. Arthur did not choose beauty easily, but when he chose, he stayed. For 2 days, Arthur remained in the hospital. For 2 days, the house filled with old tension. Lisa became commander. Michael became opposition. Emily became quiet. Rachel became invisible behind a laptop she never really used. Then David arrived from Washington, D.C. David was Lisa and Michael's younger brother, 44, an attorney for a private equity firm near K Street. Clean coat, expensive watch, voice smooth enough to make an insult sound like policy. He stepped into the hallway, looked at the old wallpaper and sighed. We need to talk about this house. No one welcomed the sentence. Even the furnace seemed to pause. Lisa stood in the doorway to the parlor. Dad is alive. For now, David said, then immediately regretted how it sounded. I mean, he can't come back here like nothing happened. Michael folded his arms. And what do you suggest? David set his leather bag on the table. A continuing care facility, sale of the property, division of assets, clean transition. Clean. Humans loved clean words for messy things. Lisa's eyes flashed. You've been here 6 minutes, and I can see what none of you want to admit. Michael laughed. Oh, here we go. David ignored him. This house is dangerous. Financially and physically, Dad has no business being here. Lisa can't keep sacrificing her life. Michael can't sleeping in the guest room every time he loses a job. Emily and Rachel can't keep hiding here from adulthood. Rachel looked up sharply. Emily's face went pale. Lisa said, enough. But David had come prepared to be useful, and useful people can be cruel when no one asks for their help. I spoke with Carlisle Urban Partners this morning. Michael stared. You did what? They're developing 3 properties near West Chestnut Street. This lot would interest them. Lisa stepped forward. Dad is in a hospital bed and you called developers? David held up a hand. I made an inquiry. Michael's voice dropped. You always make inquiries before funerals? That silenced him for a moment. Then David looked toward Arthur's chair. Dad would understand practicality. I almost hissed. Arthur understood sacrifice. That was different. When Arthur came home 5 days later, he came home so smaller. Hospitals do that to old men. They send them back with plastic bracelets, medication schedules, and the faint smell of antiseptic clinging to their skin. He entered the house with a walker, jaw tight, refusing help until the second step from the porch nearly defeated him. Lisa reached for him. I'm fine. You're not. I said, I'm fine, Michael muttered. There he is. Arthur heard him. He always heard more than he admitted. But he said nothing. They set him up in the parlor because stairs were impossible now. The room had once been Eleanor's music room. Her upright piano still stood near the window, slightly out of tune with a framed photograph of her on top. Arthur avoided looking at it. That night, everyone gathered in the dining room. The long oak table was scarred from decades of meals, arguments, birthdays, bills, and one Thanksgiving, when Michael punched the wall instead of David. Arthur sat at the head, a blanket over his knees. Lisa had made stew. Nobody wanted it. David opened his full folder. Arthur looked at it with disgust. What's that? Documents. I know what documents look like. David breathed in. We need to discuss your care plan. Arthur stared at him. My care plan is not dying. That's not a plan. It's worked so far. Michael almost smiled. Lisa did not. David slid papers forward. The safest option is assisted living. A quality place. I found one outside Bryn Mawr. Arthur's face did not move. No, Lisa softened her voice. Dad, you fell. I noticed. You could have died, but I didn't. David leaned forward. This is exactly the problem. You refuse every reasonable solution. Arthur's eyes sharpened. No, I refuse solutions that sound like people trying to get rid of me. The room went still. Rachel looked at the floor. Emily held her breath. David's mouth tightened. That is not fair. Arthur's voice remained flat. Fair has never paid a bill in this house. There it was. The sentence that had lived beneath every Maddox argument for years. Bills. Debt. Obligation. Money. The language Arthur spoke instead of love. Lisa put a spoon down. We are not talking about money. Arthur turned to her. We are always talking about money. You just dress it up nicer. Michael stood. I can't do this. Arthur looked at him. You rarely could. Michael stopped. The room froze. That was Arthur's cruelty, small, precise, almost casual. Michael's face changed, and for 1 second I saw the boy he used to be before years hardened him into a man who laughed at his own disappointment. I'm going out, he said. The front door slammed behind him. Lisa closed her eyes. David gathered the papers. Emily whispered, Grandpa. Arthur looked toward her and something in his face softened. Only for a moment. Then he looked away. I'm tired. Everyone thought that meant the conversation was over. It wasn't. It had only gone underground. That night I slept beside Arthur's parlor bed. The house settled around us. At 1:17 he woke. Not fully. Pain woke him, then memory. His hand moved toward the side table where Eleanor's photograph stood. He touched the frame with 2 fingers. I tried, he whispered. Not to me, not to anyone living. I tried, Ellie. His voice broke on her name. I had heard that voice before, once. 10 years earlier, the night after Eleanor's funeral, Arthur sat on the kitchen floor with his back against the cabinets, still wearing his black suit, shoes muddy from cemetery grass. He held me like a man holding the last warm thing in the world. She told me to keep them together, he said then. His shoulders shook once. Just once. She made it sound like I'd know how. Eleanor's last weeks had smelled of lavender lotion, medicine, and rain. People came and went. Food arrived in glass dishes. Lisa handled appointments. Michael fixed the porch. David called from D.C. saying he was buried at work. Emily and Rachel visited in careful shifts, both adults, both scared of saying the wrong thing. Arthur stayed beside Eleanor every night. He slept in a chair. He learned how to adjust pillows, crush pills, red paint in her eyebrows. And on her final evening, when the sky outside turned pink over the rooftops, Eleanor asked everyone to leave the room. Except Arthur, except me. I sat on the quilt near her feet. Her hand, thin and cold, rested in his. Promise me, she whispered. Arthur bent closer. Anything. Don't let this family scatter. His face tightened. They're grown. That's when people scatter most. He looked down. I'm not good with words. I know. A tiny smile moved across her face. That's why I'm asking for a life, not a speech. Arthur closed his eyes. I'll keep them together. Eleanor looked at me then. Jasper will check. She died before sunrise. Arthur kept the promise. Badly sometimes, harshly often, but completely. No one knew, no one asked. Humans are strange that way. They complain about locked doors, but rarely check who built the roof over them. Over the next week, the house became a courtroom. Not officially. Worse, family court. David argued sale. Lisa argued care. Michael argued history. Emily and Rachel argued nothing out loud, which meant everything remained inside them. Arthur listened from the parlor chair with the expression of a man watching strangers discuss weather over his grave. One afternoon, David brought a representative from Carlisle Urban Partners. Her name was Vanessa Blake, Senior Acquisitions Director, polished, efficient. Kind in the way professionals is kind when kindness costs nothing. She admired the brickwork, the original banister, the multi-generational potential of the property footprint. Arthur sat in the parlor and watched her measure his life with her eyes. I perched on the piano. When Vanessa reached the hallway wall covered in family photographs, she smiled. Beautiful history. Arthur said, history isn't for sale. David cleared his throat. Dad, Arthur kept looking at Vanessa. You ever build anything? She blinked. I'm sorry, with your hands. Vanessa's smile tightened. Not houses, no. Arthur nodded. Then don't call it potential. You don't know what's already here. Lisa looked away. Michael smiled faintly. David's face reddened. After Vanessa left, the explosion came. David shut the door too hard. You humiliated me. Arthur stared at him. No, you handled that yourself. David's voice sharpened. You know what your problem is? You mistake stubbornness for virtue. Arthur's eyes lifted. And you mistake price for value. That house is collapsing around us. This house held you when you had nowhere else. David laughed. Held me? This house trapped us. You trapped us, all your rules, your silence, your judgment. Mom was warmth, you were the wall. The room went dead quiet. Arthur's face did not change, but I saw his hand tightened on the armrest. David stepped closer. You want the truth? We stayed connected because Mom loved us. After she died, this family became a waiting room with bills. Lisa whispered, David, stop. But he didn't. You never comforted anyone. You never apologized. You never said anything that mattered. You just stood there making everyone feel smaller. Arthur looked toward Eleanor's photograph. For one moment, I thought he might speak. Tell them. Tell them about the mortgage he secretly refinanced to pay Lisa's nursing school debt. Tell them about the construction contacts he called when Michael's company failed. Tell them about the money he sent David during law school under Eleanor's name, because David would not accept help from him. Tell them about the attic room he repaired for Emily after her marriage ended. Tell them about the credit card balances he quietly paid for Rachel when she was too ashamed to ask anyone. Tell them he had spent 10 years keeping them close by pretending to be the wall they could lean against and hate at the same time. He said nothing. David shook his head. Exactly. Then he walked out. Arthur sat very still. That night he did not eat. At 3 a.m. I found him awake in the parlor, staring at the ceiling. Rain whispered against the glass. I should have let them go, he said. I jumped onto the blanket covering his knees. He rested his hand on my back. She said keep them together. She didn't say make them like me. I pressed my face into his wrist. His pulse was thin, but steady. 2 days later, the secret began unraveling, because Rachel went looking for printer paper. That is how human lives change sometimes. Not through thunder, through office supplies. She went into the basement storage room, the one nobody liked because it smelled of damp cardboard, paint thinner, and old laundry. Boxes were stacked beneath shelves labeled in Arthur's block handwriting. Tax. Eleanor Medical, House Repairs, Lisa, Michael, Dave, Rachel. Rachel stopped when she saw her name. The basement bulb flickered. She pulled down the box. Inside were envelopes, receipts, printed emails, bank statements. A note in Arthur's handwriting. Rachel Rent Bridge, February through June. Another, do not tell her. She needs dignity more than instruction. Rachel sat on the concrete floor. Then she opened Emily's box. Then Michael's. Then Lisa's. By the time she came upstairs, her face had changed, not shocked, shattered. She found Lisa in the kitchen cutting vegetables too hard. Did you know Grandpa paid my rent? Lisa frowned. What? Rachel placed the documents on the counter. When I lost the Philly apartment, he paid 4 months through the landlord. I thought the lease office made an error. Lisa picked up one paper. Her face drained. Rachel's voice shook. There are boxes for everyone. The knife slipped from Lisa's hand and clattered into the sink. Michael came in from the porch. What happened? Rachel turned toward him. He helped all of us. Michael looked at the papers. His expression hardened first, because people often armor themselves before truth reaches them. Then he saw his own name. Maddox Construction Lien Settlement. Arthur Payment Anonymous. Michael stared. No. Lisa opened another envelope, her own. Tuition payoff. Lancaster General Nursing Program. Paid from Arthur personal account. She sat down. No, she whispered. But there it was. Black ink, dates, amounts, proof. David returned home that evening and found them all in the dining room with boxes spread across the table. Arthur was asleep in the parlor, or pretending. David stopped in the doorway. What is this? Michael held up a folder. You tell us. David's face shifted. What are you doing in Dad's private records? Rachel snapped, finding the family he apparently carried while we called him heartless. David frowned. Lisa handed him an envelope, his name. Law school emergency transfer. Housing deposit. Exam fees. All paid by Arthur through accounts labeled under Eleanor's Memorial Trust. David read silently. His jaw tightened, then loosened, then tightened again. I didn't ask him for this. Michael's laugh came out broken. None of us did. That seems to be the point. David put the paper down. Why hide it? Lisa looked toward the parlor. Because he's Dad. Emily had been quiet all evening. She finally opened a folder with her name. Inside were records from 2 years earlier. Private investigator invoice, legal consultation, emergency hotel booking, a note. Emily may not tell us everything. Make sure she has somewhere safe if she leaves again. Emily covered her mouth. When her marriage collapsed, she told the family it was mutual. Clean, adult. Nobody pushed. Arthur did not ask questions. He simply left an envelope under her windshield one morning with a key to the attic room and a note. No questions upstairs. She thought he was being cold. He was giving her refuge. Emily began to cry. Not loudly. Just completely. David looked toward the parlor where Arthur's breathing rasped softly in sleep. For the first time, he seemed uncertain. That uncertainty frightened him. So he became angry. This doesn't erase how he treated people. No, Lisa said quietly. It changes what we thought we were seeing. Michael looked down at his folder. He let me hate him rather than know he bailed me out. Rachel wiped her face. Why would anyone do that? No one answered. But I knew. Because Arthur had promised Eleanor to keep the family together. And sometimes he thought love worked best when nobody owed him gratitude. The next morning, Arthur knew. Of course he knew. He saw the boxes before anyone spoke. His eyes moved from Lisa to Michael to David to Emily to Rachel, then to me. I sat on the windowsill. He sighed. Basement? Rachel nodded. Printer paper. Arthur closed his eyes. Damn printer. No one laughed. Lisa stood with her arms folded, but her face had softened in a way that looked painful. Why didn't you tell us? Arthur looked at his hands. Because help gets ruined when people feel indebted. Michael stared at him. You let me think I was alone. You weren't, but I thought I was. Arthur nodded once. I know. That hurt more because he didn't defend himself. David stepped forward. You let us think you didn't care. Arthur looked up at his youngest son. You were easier to help when you were angry at me. David's face tightened. That's insane, maybe. No, not maybe. That is insane. Arthur's voice remained tired. You needed to leave this house thinking you did it yourself. David looked away. Silence opened between them. Then Emily asked the question that mattered. Was this because of Grandma? Arthur's entire body changed. Not much. Enough. His eyes moved toward Eleanor's photograph on the piano. Yes, Lisa sat slowly. What did she ask you? Arthur's mouth trembled once. He looked very old then. Older than the fall. Older than the house. She told me not to let you scatter. No one spoke. Rain began again outside, soft against the windows. Arthur swallowed. I didn't know how. His voice became rough. I'm not gentle like she was. I tried. I made rules, paid things, fixed things, kept rooms open, kept the roof patched, kept food in the freezer, kept doors unlocked. He looked at Michael. When your company folded, I called men I hadn't spoken to in 20 years. Michael looked down. Arthur looked at Lisa. When your loans came due, I sold my truck. Lisa covered her mouth. Arthur looked at David. When you refused my help, I sent it through your mother's account, because I knew you'd take love from her before you'd take it from me. David's eyes filled despite himself. Arthur looked at Emily. When you came home with a bruise you said was from a cabinet, I hired someone to make sure you were safe. Emily began crying again. Arthur looked at Rachel. When your rent fell apart, I called the landlord and said you had a family emergency. He didn't believe me until I paid. Rachel whispered, Why didn't you just hug me? Arthur's face broke, just slightly, as if something inside him finally gave way. I don't know how to do that when people are hurting. The sentence destroyed the room. Not because it was noble, because it was true. Arthur Maddox, the hardest man in the house, had spent his whole life protecting people with tools he barely understood. Money, repairs, rules, silence, distance. He had built shelter out of everything except words. Lisa stood first. She walked to him. For a moment Arthur looked afraid, actually afraid. Then she bent and hugged him. He did not hug back immediately. His arms hovered in the air like he had forgotten their purpose. Then slowly, awkwardly, he placed one hand against her back. Lisa cried into his shoulder. I thought you didn't see us, she whispered. Arthur closed his eyes. I saw too much. Michael turned away, wiping his face with the heel of his hand. David stood frozen. Emily and Rachel held each other near the table. I jumped down from the windowsill and walked beneath the chairs. Humans often need something small moving through grief, so the room remembers life continues. For a while no one talked. That was best. Not every revelation needs immediate explanation. But families rarely heal in one scene. That would be too easy. The next several days were strange. Tenderness embarrassed everyone. Arthur became irritable whenever someone thanked him. Lisa kept trying to adjust his pillows, and he kept telling her she was bad at it. Michael fixed the porch railing without being asked. David canceled a second meeting with Carlisle Urban Partners, but did not announce it until later. Emily began playing Eleanor's piano at night, badly at first, then better. Rachel started scanning old photographs for a digital archive and labeling them with dates. Arthur corrected from across the room. No, that was 1998. How do you know? Your mother wore that blue dress to Lisa's promotion dinner. You remember dresses? I remember your grandmother. That silenced everyone. Slowly, the house changed. Not dramatically. No miracle. Just small adjustments. Chairs moved closer. Doors stayed open longer. Conversations paused before becoming attacks. Arthur still spoke sharply. He still muttered about lights left on. He still complained that Michael used the wrong screws on the porch rail. But now, when he did, they heard something else beneath it. Fear. Care. The only language he had practiced long enough to speak fluently. Then came the final test. Carlisle Urban Partners sent a formal offer. The number was large enough to make everyone quiet. Even Lisa. Even Michael. Even Arthur. David placed the offer on the dining room table. Nobody touched it for a while. Outside, spring rain darkened the brick sidewalks. The stained glass window above the stairs cast red and blue patches across the floor. Arthur sat in his wheelchair near the table. He had begun using it reluctantly after physical therapy sessions left him exhausted. David cleared his throat. This would solve a lot. Michael looked at him sharply. I thought you canceled them. I did. They sent it anyway. Lisa stared at the number. Rachel whispered, that's a lot of money. Emily looked around the house. At what cost? David sighed. I'm not advocating. I'm just saying we need to be honest. Arthur reached for the paper. Everyone watched. He studied the offer slowly. Then he looked up. This house is not a prison. No one expected that, Arthur continued. If keeping it makes you resent each other, sell it. Lisa shook her head. Dad, no, listen. The room obeyed. This house was your mother's dream. Then it became my promise. That does not mean it has to be your sentence. His voice was tired but steady. I kept doors open because Eleanor asked me to keep the family from scattering. But a house cannot do that by itself. Brick can't love you. Wood can't forgive you. Rooms can hold memory, but they can't replace mercy. The rain tapped steadily against the windows. Arthur pushed the offer back toward them. You decide together. Not for me. Not for your mother. For yourselves. That was the most generous thing he had ever said. And perhaps the hardest. For years they believed Arthur controlled the house because he could not let go. Now he was offering to let it go if holding it hurt them. That changed everything. David sat down slowly. I don't want to sell it. Everyone looked at him. He gave a humorless laugh. I know, I'm surprised too. Michael said, why? David looked toward the stair landing. Because I spent years saying this place trapped us. Maybe I just hated that it remembered who I was before I became impressive. Lisa smiled faintly through tears. That sounds expensive and therapeutic. Michael leaned back. I can't buy anyone out. No one asked you to, Lisa said. Rachel looked at Arthur. What if we made it useful? Emily turned. What do you mean? Rachel hesitated. A family trust. Maybe restore part of it, rent the back unit someday. Keep rooms for anyone who needs to come home. Not forever, just a landing place. The word moved through the room. Landing place. Not shrine, not burden, not asset, something softer. Arthur looked toward Eleanor's photograph. His eyes glistened. Then he nodded once. She would like that. They rejected the offer, not impulsively, not romantically. With spreadsheets, repairs, legal documents, arguments, and 3 meetings that made Michael threaten to throw David's laptop out a window. But they rejected it. The Maddox house stayed. Months passed. Arthur learned to walk short distances again with a cane. Badly, angrily, successfully. Lisa stopped correcting everyone's grief. Michael started a small restoration business and used the basement as an office. David visited twice a month from Washington and pretended not to enjoy fixing breakfast for everyone. Emily stayed longer than she planned. Rachel moved out eventually, but left half her books in the attic, which meant she intended to return. And I, Jasper, continued my inspections. Windows wheels, pantry, laundry baskets, Arthur's chair, Eleanor's piano. The house was still old, still drafty, still full of memories that creaked at night. But it no longer felt like everyone inside was waiting for permission to leave. On the first anniversary of Eleanor's death, Arthur asked to be taken to the garden. It was a narrow brick courtyard behind the house, crowded with herbs, old rose bushes, and a Japanese maple Eleanor had planted after Lisa's nursing graduation. The family gathered there near dusk. No children. Only adults with lines around their eyes and histories they were learning to carry differently. Arthur sat beneath the maple, with a wool blanket over his knees. I lay beside his chair in the cooling grass. He held Eleanor's wedding ring in his palm. Lisa noticed first. Dad? Arthur looked at the ring. I kept this in my nightstand because I didn't know where else to put it. No one spoke. He turned it slowly between his fingers. She said love was not what you say when things are easy. She said love is what you keep doing when nobody applauds. Michael looked down. David's jaw tightened. Emily wiped her eyes. Rachel held her breath. Arthur closed his fist around the ring. I was angry at her for leaving me with that promise. The honesty startled them, he continued. Then I was angry at you for needing me. Then I was angry at myself for not knowing how to be needed kindly. A bird moved in the ivy. Distant traffic hummed beyond the alley. Arthur looked at each of them. I was not a good man in every way. Lisa whispered, "Dad." He lifted a hand. "No, let me finish while I still can." The garden went still. I was harsh, proud, afraid of tenderness. I thought if I kept problems solved, pain would stay quiet. That is not love, not all of it. His voice shook. But I loved you every day. Badly some days, silently most days. But I kept the promise. He opened his hand. The ring caught the last light. I kept it. No one moved. Then David, the polished son, the practical son, the one who had spent years calling his father a wall, walked over and knelt beside Arthur's chair. He did not speak. He just placed his forehead against Arthur's hand. Arthur's face folded. His fingers touched David's hair. Awkward, tender, late, but real. One by one, the others came closer. Not a perfect family. No such creature exists, but a family still. That night, Arthur slept deeply in the parlor. I slept on his blanket. Near midnight, he woke and looked toward the piano. For a moment, I think he saw Eleanor, not as a ghost, as memory, as mercy, as the part of love that stays in a room after breath leaves it. He whispered, "Did I do all right?" I purred. It was the only answer I had. Arthur Maddox died 6 months later, not dramatically, not in pain, but in his chair beside the window while autumn rain softened the city outside. This time, the house did not fracture. It mourned. There is a difference. Lisa washed his coffee mug and placed it on the shelf. Michael repaired the broken stair without being asked. David handled the legal documents without turning grief into business. Emily played Eleanor's piano that evening. Rachel sat on the floor and let me climb into her lap. No one spoke for a long time. Then Lisa said, "He really did keep us together." Michael nodded. David looked toward Arthur's empty chair. He just made it very difficult to thank him. They laughed, softly, through tears. The house heard it. So did I. Years from now, maybe the Maddox house will belong to someone else. Maybe the brick will be repointed. Maybe the wallpaper will come down. Maybe strangers will stand in the dining room and call it charming without knowing how many apologies once sat around that table. That is the way houses survive people. They keep the shape of what happened long after names fade. But I know what happened here. I know the old man everyone called impossible was the one who stayed. I know he carried shame, bills, broken marriages, pride, fear, adult children, silent grandchildren, and a promise made beside a dying woman's bed. I know he was not gentle, but he was loyal. I know he did not say love well, so he became it badly, stubbornly, daily. He became paid bills, unlocked doors, fixed roofs, anonymous transfers. A chair left open, a room ready upstairs. A house that kept receiving people, even after they cursed the man who kept it standing. Humans often miss love when it does not arrive in the shape they wanted. They look for warm words and miss the cold hands repairing the furnace. They wait for apologies and miss the man standing in rain cleaning the gutter before anyone wakes. They believe tenderness must sound soft, but some love sounds like a hammer before dawn. Some love looks like an unpaid debt quietly erased. Some love sits in a chair pretending not to watch the door. And some people are not good at saying what the heart means. But their whole life becomes the sentence. Arthur Maddox was one of those people. He did not leave behind speeches. He left behind shelter. He did not ask to be understood. He kept his word anyway. And if there is one thing I have learned in all my old cat years, watching humans love and wound and return to each other in the same rooms, it is this. There are people who never learn how to say, "I love you." But every day they stay. Every day they carry. Every day they keep the promise. And sometimes, when the world finally grows quiet enough to understand them, you realize their whole life was the love letter.